Blessings, beloveds. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, with you today. All right, today's talk is going to be on the month of March, which we haven't quite gotten into yet because it's actually the 22nd of February today. But basically what we're looking at is the energy of Pisces, and the sun went into Pisces on the 19th of February, which was just a few days ago. So we have a lot of Pisces energy at the moment. A lot of planets are in Pisces. The Sun, Mercury, Venus, Neptune, and Chiron are all in Pisces. So this is the birthday month for the Piscean people, and I dare say that Pisceans, since Chiron entered Pisces, which was quite some time ago, and since Neptune entered in Pisces, which was a very long time ago, Pisces people have had to work through quite a lot with Neptune in Pisces and Chiron in Pisces. Anyway, it is the month of Pisces, and before I unpack a little bit of what I think that reflects, just want to touch on the eclipses. You know, we've had a lot of eclipses since May last year, 2017, which has, in my view and in my experience, personally, and certainly through speaking with other people, there's been a lot of very intense transformation taking place, and a lot of painful experiences have been taking place as well on a number of different levels for different people. So the last eclipse we had was on the 15th of February. It was a partial solar eclipse, and it was in the Aquarius Leo axis. As we know, it has been there since mid last year, and that will not cease until around about November of this year, of 2018. So the solar eclipse that occurred on the 15th of February, I feel was incredibly powerful, and just judging on what other people have been describing for their own personal experiences and how it's impacted them, it was a very intense solar eclipse, or even though it was a partial eclipse. Now, naturally, depending on where that landed in your chart, will obviously, give you further information about in which part of your life that highlighted certain things. And don't forget that with eclipses, we're really looking at a period of a couple of weeks leading up to the eclipse date, which was the 15th of February, which was only a week ago. As we're moving forward, whilst the eclipse is finished, there's always still some residue, some energy, things kind of still clearing up and trying to move, as it were. I mean, even collectively, the eclipse has brought about some incidences in the world that haven't been too great. Anyway, on a personal level, really, you need to be looking at where that eclipse landed in your chart. But personally, I have felt this last eclipse that we've just had, although I've felt every eclipse since May of 2017, impacting my life incredibly personally. All these eclipses in Aquarius, Leo, have very important connections in my birth chart, as I briefly mentioned in my last video. So I'm just wondering how you are all feeling post the eclipse, solar eclipse, and how you've managed to work through that energy and what it's brought up for you as well. I mean, eclipses, especially solar eclipses, really bring about situations that are very critical in nature. So something quite critical and dramatic can take place in order for the energy to move and shift in a very different direction. So I've never really spoken to anybody or seen much evidence for solar eclipses necessarily producing easy or positive results it's they I guess you could say that they can eventually become positive because of perhaps what results through the necessary crisis that comes up that enables people to make different choices and take different directions. But either way, eclipses, particularly solar eclipses, are very intense energy. It's a condensed energy. We're talking about a conjunction. We're talking about the sun and the moon being conjunct, of course, with one of the nodes there as well. And that's what a solar eclipse is. It's the sun and moon together. So it's a very potent energy. You can't see what's actually going on. It's black, essentially. We're talking about a new moon. So when you look in the heavens towards a new moon, you can't actually see it, can you? So because it's completely black. And metaphorically and symbolically, what that is suggesting is that whatever is happening during that solar eclipse, it can be often very difficult to identify what this eclipse is really going to require in terms of shift of direction and change, but that essentially does become clear as the energy eases off. Conjunctions are always a very potent, intense energy and can produce very powerful results, but not necessarily in an easy way. All right, so let's move into Pisces. As I said, we have quite a few planets in Pisces at the moment. It is the Pisces month, and we still have all planets moving in direct motion, which is a good thing, because essentially it's enabling us to actually work through and pursue and push forward into the things that we need to actually leave behind and close and finish. Because the energy of Pisces, remember, Pisces is the 12th sign, so it's the last sign in the zodiac wheel, and Pisces is always representative of endings and completion. And because Pisces is such an emotional, sensitive, water sign, yin, it's internal. It produces a lot of sensitivity, okay, but a lot of clairvoyant ability, psychic ability, intuition. A person's intuition can be really heightened during this time while we have all these planetary energies in Pisces. However, on the same token, Pisces can produce incredible confusion for people as well. It's the opposite sign to Virgo, so Pisces is everything that's not of this world, which is fine if somebody has tremendous awareness, intuition and insight, because they can actually tap into the Pisces energy from the other side, if you like, and actually bring in that intuition and that clear claircognizant knowing, insight, understanding, intuition, and get clarity on their life and situations. But if somebody is feeling quite troubled and really struggling, then this Pisces energy can create further confusion, because it can create disillusionment, essentially. Pisces is idealistic, extremely idealistic, so it projects a lot of ideals, and you could even say illusions, to situations, relationships and so forth. So there's a strong need to be to try and make yourself remain very grounded during this time, because Pisces can make us want to escape the harshness of this reality, essentially, the harshness of our problems, of our difficulties, of our challenges. Pisces is the softest energy. It's so soft and so soothing and so incredibly sensitive. It doesn't want to feel this harshness of this 3D reality, but it does, because whilst we are incarnate in this physical body, we are all subject to experiencing the various levels and layers of this 3D dimension. So as I said, currently all planets are still moving in direct motion, which is enabling us to complete with you know, with that sense of being able to move through, essentially, because when planets are moving direct, it means all the energy is moving direct. Now, even though we've got all this Pisces energy, which is talking about closure, completion, and endings, with all the planetary energies moving direct, to me that says that it's really enabling us to actually to do that, to close things, to finish things, to complete things, and to say goodbye. You know, one of the things that Pisces really struggles with is saying goodbye to an illusion, essentially. That's a favorite sort of line of mine, actually. It's kind of cute and funny, I think. So everything is going to be moving direct until the 8th of March. Now, on the 8th of March, Jupiter turns stationary and goes retrograde. So, you know, we're essentially for a couple of months, we've had all these planetary energies moving forward, which is very intense because there's nothing, there's no pause, there's no take a breath, you know, and kind of try and get yourself grounded, or just literally take a breather. It's really hard to take a breather when everything's moving forward because the energy is intense, it's moving fast, and we just have to go with it, literally. And sometimes it's moving too fast, you know, depending on what's going on in your life, of course. So things will start to slow down a bit around about the 8th of March when Jupiter turns retrograde, and then Mercury will turn retrograde on the 22nd of March. So now is a really, really good time, and has been a good time to essentially move through in decision making, anything to do with the written or spoken word. So if you're studying, for example, you know, and you have to submit reports, essays, etc., this is a really good time to utilize that energy and move through and progress through that. If you're a writer, if you're writing, if you're working in a work environment, you know, that requires you to write, read, etc., you know, this energy is very, very helpful for all of that. And certainly on a more personal level, just mentally making decisions, making very clear decisions. Although Mercury is in Pisces, sometimes that can be a little bit hard to make clear decisions because, you know, Pisces opposite to Virgo. So, you know, Mercury is said to be in fall in Pisces. In fall? Yes, in fall. So, you know, Mercury in Pisces does really well from that right brain, that higher mind, even though the higher mind is ruled by Uranus, according to, you know, EA astrology. I would still say that, you know, Mercury in Pisces is a very different Mercury to every other Mercury. You know, we're talking about Mercury in Pisces being in touch with the entirety, you know, of the cosmos, of everything. So Mercury in Pisces has a perception that pierces through this illusion, the veil of Maya, as they call it in Eastern philosophies and so forth. Mercury in Pisces can be wonderful for intuition and drawing in information and getting clairaudient, you know, senses about things and information. But where it struggles is when it has to be, you know, very logical, rational, and practical. You know, Mercury in Pisces can really struggle with that. So again, it's about finding that point where you can become very, very grounded. But if you've got something very serious to consider from a mental perspective, you know, while Mercury is in Pisces, it's moving direct, so that's very, very helpful. But it is in Pisces, so it can create some confusion. So perhaps it's best to, you know, check in with somebody close to you, or even check in with myself, and you know, just get a second sort of view or perspective on very important decisions that you may need to be making. Okay, so on the 1st of March, Jupiter will be trine Venus. So Jupiter's in Scorpio, Venus is in Pisces. these little transits that I'm about to run through. They're only a day or two, so they're very quick little transits that flow through. But it could be a day where something could really present itself. And when we're talking about Jupiter trine Venus, Venus is the world of relationships, clearly. It's also the world of finances and money. So, put Jupiter into the mix in an aspect that's called a trine, which is a beautiful flowing energy. It's two energies coming together and dancing together, as it were. There's no friction, there's no tension. It's just beautiful flow energy. So Jupiter trine Venus on the 1st of March, this could be a really good day for people who want to travel. Jupiter's all about travel. And it could possibly, present some kind of opportunity with regards to finances. And it's a very nice aspect to have if you're forming a relationship, in a relationship, wanting something more to develop from that relationship. But whatever it's going to be a very beautiful energy on that particular day, which can create some sense of abundance or opportunity, and an easy sort of flow of energy that can really get things moving in that in the sense of relationships and money. So I wouldn't suggest play the lottery, but hey, if you want, you can. Okay, moving on. So on the 4th of March, Venus will be conjunct Mercury. So Venus is in Pisces, Mercury is in Pisces. That could just simply be a day where you have some really beautiful conversations, a really great connection with somebody on a mental level, and it's just going to really bring up a strong love kind of feeling, through that connection. So something can come up in the form of connecting with somebody mentally with a very strong sense Venusian Pisces energy about it. 5th of March, Venus will be conjunct Chiron. Now, that's a very different picture altogether. Chiron is it's the planet where we feel most wounded and rejected. And Chiron's been in Pisces for quite some time, and will be in Pisces until late April, actually. So I won't talk about Chiron in Aries just yet. I'll wait until we get into April. But Venus conjunct Chiron on that particular day, that can be a bit of a tough day for, collectively, energetically, but certainly for people who have Venus in Pisces. So people who have Venus in Pisces, so check what sign your Venus is in to see if this applies to you. Venus in Pisces people at the moment are having a Venus return, and I'm just digressing a little bit because I did actually want to talk about this. A Venus return happens every 548 days, I think it is, so every couple of years, thereabouts. And I personally I've got Venus in Pisces myself, and every time I'm about to have a Venus return, and every time I've had a Venus return, or I've spoken to other people and done readings for people who've had a Venus return, Venus returns are really quite prominent in my opinion. They do show up, in a pretty important way. It's the classic interpretation and symbolism that seems to show up with a Venus return is very simply it's a really powerful time for evaluation of all things to do with Venus. So it's a re-evaluation process of your finances and your money, the material world, and perhaps how you're handling that, how you've been managing that, if you've been overspending or whatever the case may be. But it's a really strong point to reconsider and reevaluate that whole system of the material world. And certainly if you're in a relationship, or you've been thinking about relationships, or whatever the case may be, there'll be an incredible evaluation period that comes up within you. And even if you're not in a relationship, it might just very well stimulate and highlight what you've been reflecting on yourself, in terms of relationships. Because if somebody is single, they are still reflecting on the world of relationships to some degree, because essentially they're thinking about potentially having a relationship, or, you know, trying to connect with somebody, or looking for their soulmate, or, you know, whatever you want to call it. So we're always, even if we're not in a relationship personally, we're in a relationship with ourselves to begin with. But certainly if we are single, there's in the back of our minds somewhere, and sometimes in the very front part of our mind, we're always kind of reflecting and thinking about the next relationship that we're potentially going to go into. And, you know, that comes from the thoughts and reflections that we've had from our past relationship. Because certainly when we end a relationship, it, you know, after a while, it's different for everybody, but after a while we start to think about, you know, what is it that we learned from that relationship? How have we grown from that relationship? You know, what is it that we would do differently, and so forth. So we're always kind of reflecting whether we're in a relationship or whether we're out of a relationship. Now, if you're in a relationship and you're having a Venus return at the moment, you will potentially really look at your relationship right now and look at the elements and components of your relationship that need some sort of reevaluation and adjustment. And it might be leaving the relationship, or it might just be finding a great place of appreciation of the current relationship you're in. Something, you know, really blossoms and is highlighted during that time. But Venus returns are very powerful when it comes to relationships and money. Something always changes, is reevaluated, and shows up essentially in your consciousness, and therefore projected outside of you onto your relationship with money and your personal, intimate love relationships. So Venus conjunct Chiron, just to go back to that on the 5th of March, that's going to be quite a sensitive day. So if you've got things going on at the moment that you're working through spiritually and emotionally in relationships, or in relationship to yourself, just be mindful that, you know, around the 5th and 6th of March, it's very possible that you will feel quite overwhelmed by deep emotions that are not very, very comfortable. But, you know, that'll only be for a couple of days. It will bring up some stuff, but just be aware that it's only for a couple of days, and then you can take a breath again and things will settle down. On the 4th of March, we'll have the Sun in Pisces conjunct Neptune in Pisces. That's a beautiful energy. You know, it's a transcendental energy. We're talking, Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, by the way. So, you know, Venus is the planet of love. And when you put it in the sign of Pisces, Venus in Pisces is transcended love. It's looking for what Neptune is. And Neptune is that unconditional, transcendent love, the divine love that we all seek. This is one of the issues that a lot of us tend to seek that through our partnerships, our relationships. And the reality is that no human being could really deliver that for us, because it is the divine love that is the source of all creation, that we can experience that kind of connection with and that relationship with. But to project that onto our partner and to place them on a pedestal where they become the god or the goddess is really unfair, to put somebody in that position, because nobody can truly live up to that. As long as we are human, we are still evolving, right? So we're still growing, we're still learning, we're still developing, all those things. So is it possible for us in the human form to be that pure, transcendent, divine love? No, because if that were the case, we wouldn't be here in this physical body. We certainly have, we're born of that, so it is within us. But what I'm trying to say is, when we try to project that onto our partner and expect that from them, it's a massive illusion that comes crashing down, and that's what often Venus in Pisces can do. it looks at the other person as so incredibly whole and divine and holy, and very soon down the track they discover that, well, the person is not divine and holy. They are born of that, but they are still going through their process of evolution, and therefore their struggles and their pains, and and then you add in the whole karmic component of, and I'm not talking about karma as in good or bad, I'm just talking about, another word is samskaras, which comes from Eastern thinking and philosophy, which is essentially the process of the soul's evolution relating to the actions that we decide on, and then certainly act on, that create circumstances and consequences that we will at some point need to balance out again. Okay, so that's what I mean when I'm talking about karma. Anyway, back to Sun Neptune on the 4th of March. That's just going to be a beautiful spiritualized transcendental energy on that particular day. Those probably 4th and 5th of March, around there. It could just be that if you are the sort of person that practices in alternate sort of fields, and if you're a healer or if you're receiving a healing during that time, it's a really beautiful energy that can really produce some wonderful results on those couple of days. So sometimes we may think that these few days here and there of certain transits, they're not that important, and sometimes they're not. I admit that. Sometimes things go by without us even really noticing. But sometimes I think as well that if we are conscious of these particular energies, we can actually make the most of them. We're able to tap into them and actually use them to our advantage, or let those energies use us. let ourselves become the vehicle, for these beautiful energies that are presented at different times, and let ourselves see what that gives birth to, and what experiences we can have as a result. So it's very much like the moon. We have a full moon every month, which I'll talk about that in a minute. We have a new moon and a full moon every month. We have several eclipses throughout the year. Now we know that eclipses are really potent, and we know that the full moon and the new moon is also a potent energy that comes through every single month. And it highlights things, it brings up things, it begins things, and then it illuminates things. So we're going through this constant ebb and flow and constant movement. Nothing is static. So we're always going through these little transitional changes, and then certainly at various points in our life, based on the more slower moving planets forming aspects to our natal planets and to the angles in our chart, we go through incredibly deep transforming transitional points that can last 1 or 2 or 3 years. And then we have these in between little transits, little transitions that can just be a day here, a day there, or a week here or a week there, but they too are very important, especially when we're able to tune into their energies and basically work with them to our advantage, as I said before. Okay, so all right, where are we? Yes, so March, actually, this month we're going to have, next month, because it doesn't start for another 8 days, but in the month of March we're going to have 2 full moons. Take a breath, I say. Full moons, we all know the meaning to the full moon. It's a period of illumination. Things come to light, things come to a head. We're going to have 2 of those in March. The first one is going to be in Virgo, which will be around the 2nd of March, so the beginning of the month essentially. And the second full moon is going to be in Libra on the 31st of March, so at the end of the month. And this sometimes happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. And I feel when it happens, when we have 2 full moons in 1 month, that's saying something. That's saying something pretty strong in terms of our emotions, obviously, our day-to-day cycles, our rhythms, our sleep cycles. The moon regulates all these things. And the moon is also connected to the past, and it's also connected to our sense of security and our ego structure as well, because our ego structure is really what seeks security. Okay, so the moon reflects all those things. Now, when we're having two full moons in a month, we're kind of being really hit very hard on that ego level and an emotional level as well. So it's going to be a very sensitive month, in other words. There's going to be a lot of energy, a lot of emotion flowing and coming to light for all of us. So be prepared for that. We all know, full moons can have tremendous effects, even on the collective, universally. Activity is really heightened during full moons in our personal life, and certainly what's going on out there. So it is emotional and mental activity, and it is connected to the ego as well. So, it can stir things up quite a lot. So just be mindful of that. Beginning of March, end of March, two full moons, stirring things up internally. And when things are stirred up internally, it is, it cannot be any other way that it will then be projected out there somehow, and we'll see the results out there as well. But just, with the full moon in Virgo, Virgo is all about self-improvement, really. So something about our own personal self-improvement that we've been working on when we have the full moon at the beginning of March will perhaps show us some of what we've been working on within our own selves, what we've been improving on, and how we've improved, and if we have in fact improved at all. And at the end of the month, the full moon is going to be in Libra. So, the next phase after Virgo is Libra. So self-improvement, then moving into Libra, which is the world of relationships. So the full moon in Libra is going to highlight a lot of relationships, a lot of relationship issues for all of us, actually. So again, where is the balance or the lack of balance in our life and in relationships? And, full moon illuminates, so whatever's going on in our relationship stuff, relationship world, and specifically relationships, because it is Libra, a lot of things will be highlighted, and perhaps we'll actually be able to, take a different course of action because of what is highlighted. Okay, so nothing will be hidden, as it were. All right, so by the 7th of March, we'll have Mercury moving out of Pisces and going into the sign of Aries, and at exactly the same time, Venus will also move in Aries. So really from, the last few weeks and the next few weeks moving forward, with all this Pisces energy, I think what's being asked of all of us is to surrender, to trust, to let go, to really surrender into what I would call divine love, divine consciousness. It is pretty hard if we are the sort of person that really likes to have a lot of control in our life, and struggle when we feel that our world is out of control. Now, Pisces is the sign that can really make us feel like everything is out of our control, because it is. And when we have all these energies in Pisces, that's just emphasized so much more. So we really have a few options there. We can surrender and go with that energy and enable what is trying to find closure in our life, and end and say goodbye. Or we can resist and fight with it and then feel tremendous pain and suffering as a result. So it's up to you what you do. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy to surrender and to let go. I know how hard that is for many different reasons, as I'm sure all of you do, because none of us here on this earth plane, in this physical body, have you know, not encountered some kind of deep suffering, pain, and letting go. You know, that can come through on so many levels: relationships, jobs, family, letting people go who have whose spirit has left this physical incarnation. There's so many different levels that we experience this process of needing to surrender and let go. And certainly when Pisces, the month of Pisces, comes up, this is always a theme that presents in different ways for all of us. So, you know, depending if you are a Pisces, or if you have Venus in Pisces, or Mercury in Pisces, etc., etc. So anyway, on the 7th of March, as I said, Mercury and Venus both heading to Aries. So a lot of the